welcome to our webinar about app compliance in China. My colleague Zihao Liao, who is senior consultant here with us at CHINABRAND, and myself, Lea Schneider, will be holding the webinar together for you today. And we both work with projects concerning cybersecurity and data protection here at our company. A quick introduction to CHINABRAND. So we've been dealing with the Chinese market for over 17 years now and are active in the areas of trademark, product piracy, intellectual property and know-how, cybersecurity and data protection, as well as innovation and competition. So shortly about the content and the course of our webinar today. So I will first give an overview of the app lifecycle, intellectual property, and key steps of launching an app in the Chinese market. And my colleague will then talk about mandatory and also voluntary certifications concerning security and data protection. To put the topic in a current context, you can see here an excerpt from press communication of Chinese authorities related to compliance of apps in China. And here we see quite a trend towards more enforcement and also a stricter control of regulations for the Chinese government. So authorities are systematically monitoring app compliance in various provinces. And the problems of these apps is often inadequate and uncompliant data protection, or also the unlawful collection of personal data. Problematic apps are listed publicly on the authorities' pages and are removed from the app stores. If you want to dive deeper in the topic of personal data, we also have a webinar on our YouTube channel, specifically dealing with the personal information protection law. And if you're interested, you can go on the channel and watch it if you want to get more about this topic. Here you can see a representation of the app lifecycle according to the latest Lifecycle Security Management Guideline from the State Administration and Market Supervision. And the app lifecycle here consists of 7 phases and can be divided into 2 main sections. So the first main section is beginning with the demand analysis and then dealing with development and design in the second step, and testing in a third step, which is the last one before the release and the publication on an app store. The second section is consisting of the installation and execution, as well as updating and maintenance. So each of the 7 phases is fraught with security risks that require security analysis and management at each stage of an app's lifecycle. Depending on the different characteristics of the apps, the security risks of the app may vary also. However, the same is applicable for any app. So in each individual phase, an analysis should be conducted in order to determine whether there is the possibility of a potential violation of third-party rights, for example, in the area of intellectual property or data protection. At the same time, in each phase, the emergence of security gaps and compliance with the current laws needs to be ensured. As just described in the area of intellectual property, on the one hand, it is very important not to violate the rights of others. And then on the other hand, there is also the risk that one's own app will be imitated by third parties. So you can take precautions against this by taking various measures. Firstly, there are the logos, slogans, and icons of the app via trademark, which can be protected on the basis of the trademark law. Secondly, there is the copyright. So this arises through the programming of an app. Anyone who programs an app is automatically the creator and enjoys copyright protection. However, it is important to note that only the specific form of the app is protected and not the idea of the app itself. The idea can still be used by third parties and programmed in another app. Design protection usually protects the graphical user interface, short GUI. When applying for the design, it is elementary to state the function of the user interface for the product and to justify it in an explicit and detailed manner. So the purpose of the GUI and the way the user interacts with the hardware must be precisely stated and described. A background image alone or the graphical layout of a website cannot be protected as a GUI by design protection. And regarding the patent protection, this is not an easy task, but definitely possible. So in general, it is not possible to apply for a patent on the software as a whole. So this is not possible in China, also not in Europe or the US. But for example, an algorithm that solves a complex problem, improves efficiency, or implements certain functions within the architecture of an app can be protected as a method patent. An invention patent, on the other hand, relates to the linkage and implementation modules of an app. For example, WeChat holds an invention patent on a function to upload the address book into the app. And as a result, contacts who use the apps are directly displayed and can immediately access them, which is much more convenient than having to add each other contact individually. In line with patent applications in other areas, usefulness, novelty, and inventiveness are also a key criterion for granting a patent in China. And the challenge in this area is particularly significant because on the one hand, there are no uniform rules yet for the standard of inventiveness in app patents in China. And on the other hand, the state of art changes a lot faster here than in other sectors. Here I will briefly talk about trademarks for apps. So we have a few suggestions which can contribute to a successful application. In particular, the icon should be distinctive and stand out from others. Simplistic representations are usually rejected. Icons that contain elements which describe the service of the company or the app are also rather unsuitable, as they stand out little or hardly from the competitors in the same category and are very difficult to protect. Even if by intuition it makes sense to choose a descriptive icon, it is advisable to think in a different direction. So in general, it is not impossible to register a descriptive icon, but it is not recommended. Also, you should avoid initials. So for space reasons, many companies like to use initials for the icon, as this is also a very obvious and easy solution. But the probability that other companies already use these initials is very high, and the registered company name of the trademark in most cases does not provide enough protection for the sole initials. And when it comes to colors, there are certain colors which have emerged internationally for special segments. For example, green for communication apps. But a color distinction makes sense if you choose the color for your icon in order to stand out from the competition. And last, so many companies have developed separate e-commerce branding through the omni-channel method and no longer use the already familiar company logo. The result is mostly that apps are no longer recognized, as the consumer is often overstimulated with a variety of apps in the App Store. So using your already familiar and distinctive logo is definitely a good idea in order to stand out. And here we have listed a few negative examples that prevent apps from being distinctive. So you can see here in the first left row, the top app and the bottom app have very similar icons, and only the color of the background is different. And the first two apps in the left columns have names which sound very similar, and same applies to the two apps in the middle row. So they don't necessarily stand out from each other and are not very distinctive. In the third column, you can see that the app name is very different, but the icons are similar. So all of these examples make it hard for you to stand out from the competition and protect your IP. But we also have to keep in mind that if you're choosing an icon that you have to keep in mind should not infringe others' rights. So in the area of IP and trademark registration, during the individual steps of the first section of the life cycle of every app, it is important to consider the protection of one's own IP in advance and to take measures, but it is just as important to conduct careful preliminary research in order to be sure that no rights of others are infringed and to be compliant in this area. So in addition to the preliminary analysis in the IP area, an extensive market research is also necessary if you want to enter the Chinese market with your app. Firstly, it is important to develop concepts adapted to the Chinese consumer, and secondly, to be able to determine and select the functions of the app. Here, the cost for the market research sometimes exceeds the writing of the code for the app. And the determination of the special target group and functions of the app in regard to compliance is very important because there are different requirements from the authorities for the publication of apps in different industries and of the different functions. So app publication is not uniformly possible for foreign companies on all app stores in China. Depending on the brand of the end device, access to app stores of some certain brands may be a difficulty, as some Chinese companies do not recognize foreign business licenses. In some cases, working together with a local distributor can be a solution to this problem. And also in the Chinese app stores, there are many unofficial versions of different apps. So here it is important to apply for the software copyright certificate, in short SCC. This makes an app an official registered app version. So on the one hand, this allows you to delete apps that imitate and copy your own app. And on the other hand, you can make sure that there is not already a similar app on the Chinese market whose rights will be violated by your own app. So how can you apply for this software copyright certificate? The responsible Chinese authority for this process is the State Copyright Administration. Here you can fill out an application for an online registration. Among other things, the name, the version number, the time of completion of the software, and the main functions must be specified. In addition, a sample of the source code and a business license is required. All documents must be submitted in Chinese, and the time for the whole process is roughly 30 days from the confirmation of submission to receipt of the certificate, depending on how efficient the responsible bureau and the provinces are. So the overall duration, if you take into account the preparation of the documents, will be about 1 to 2 months. And another license you have to take into account when launching an app in China is the ICP license, which can be divided into ICP Zheng and ICP Bei'an. And it is required depending on the way the app will be used by the consumer in the future. So this criterion is whether the app is used commercially or not. If this is the case, the first step is to register with the Bei'an, and the second step is to obtain the ICP Zheng certificate. And also, there are very different app stores in China, over 400 in total, and they are also in a strong competition with each other. Therefore, it makes sense to publish the app only in the 10 to 15 app stores that are relevant to the target audience, which is defined by market coverage. And this brings us to the last step, the publishing of an app. And here my colleague will give you a detailed overview of the certifications and data protection.
Thank you, Leah. Currently, there are not so many certifications for apps in China. Typical app-related certifications include App Security certification by CCRC, China's App Security Review Technology and Certification Center. Fintech Product Certification, and MLPS, Multi-Level Protection Scheme. There is a big difference between these three certifications. The App Security Certification by CCRC is a voluntary app certification, and the Fintech Product Certification is semi-mandatory, and MLPS is mandatory. MLPS is actually not a certification, but a concrete obligation of the cybersecurity law in China. There are also significant differences in content. The Fintech Product Certification is limited to financial products, while the App Security Certification by CCRC and MLPS have no such limitations. MLPS emphasizes on IT security, while the App Security Certification by CCRC puts more emphasis on personal data protection. MLPS is the abbreviation of Multi-Level Protection Scheme. The obligation of implementing the MLPS comes from the cybersecurity law in China, and the MLPS is an official classification system whereby the company must demonstrate that its network is sufficiently protected by audit. Under the MLPS, IT systems are rated on a scale from 1 to 5. The operator of the IT system is then required to take appropriate cybersecurity measures that correspond to the level of the IT system. After the MLPS 2.0 was introduced, the object of MLPS has been greatly expanded, including networked applications, Internet of Things, big data, etc. Therefore, app also needs to implement MLPS. For more details about MLPS, we have already made many webinars, and you can watch the videos on our YouTube channel. Next, let's go into the topic voluntary certification, App Security Certification by CCRC. The requirement to implement MLPS is directly from China's cybersecurity law, while the App Security Certification by CCRC is voluntary, and it provides app operators with more economic benefits. Obtaining the App Security Certification by CCRC means that the app and its operator meets the requirements of the respective standards. Certified app operators can display their certificate on their websites, workplaces, and promotional materials. Such engines and app stores will also clearly identify certified apps. The App Security Certification by CCRC is for all types and fields of service, although the document application for certification lists only 37 typical types of service, such as online taxi, online shopping, etc. This doesn't mean that other types of apps cannot apply for the App Security Certification by CCRC, especially for apps that many companies have developed by themselves for use in smart homes. Further, let's look at the specific process of the App Security Certification by CCRC. In order to apply for this certification, one condition must first be met. The condition for applying for the App Security Certification is that the app must first be tested for security. The test is based on the standard GPT 34975 2017. And the app operator can conduct the security test by itself or hire a third party to test the app. Until now, CCRC has not announced the list of CCRC-appointed security test organizations, but based on our practical experience, the following two could have such rights to conduct the security test: the Beijing Information Security Test and Evaluation Center, as well as the Shanghai Information Security Testing Evaluation and Certification Center. There is a big difference whether the app operator conducts the security test itself or commissions a third party to do so. If the app operator conducts the security test itself, the CCRC will review the test method, test procedure, as well as the test results after receiving the test report. But if the app operator commissions a third party appointed by the CCRC to conduct the test, then the CCRC will directly recognize the test report and doesn't review it. For the content of the security test, I'll give an example here. The example concerns the requirements for uninstallation. There are 3 expected results regarding the uninstallation. All data generated during installation and use should be deleted, and the user should be notified when user data is deleted. And also the software and other applications can still be used normally after installation. Of course, there are more requirements according to the standards. Once the security test is completed, the app operator can prepare the relevant documents for the application for the app security certification by CCRC. Similar to the MLPS, the application requires a set of written documents to be completed in Chinese, such as the application for certification, company business license, and declaration of commitment of the applicant to the certification, as well as personal information security self-assessment form. Since CCRC is responsible for the app security certification throughout China, there are no provincial or regional differences in documentation, which is also different from MLPS. In this context, I'd also like to address the question of how to determine the number of applications for certifications. And here, I have 3 examples. The first case is App 1 and App 2 are the same apps, but App 1 runs on Android and App 2 on iOS. In this case, App 1 and App 2 should apply for certification separately, as these 2 apps published on different operating system platforms. And the second case is App 1 and App 2 are the same apps, but both run on iOS. But the version name of App 1 is Alexine 1.0.9999, and the version name of App 2 is Alexine 1.0.8888. Generally, the version number of the app consists of the main version and the subversion number. If the app with the same name differs only by the subversion number, the app operator can submit a description of the difference of subversion number to the CCRC. But if the app main version number changes, the CCRC will assume that the business function of the app has been changed significantly. So in this case, there is no difference of subversion number of App 1 and App 2. So App 1 and App 2 could be certified together. The third case is App 1 and App 2 are the same apps and both run on Android, but App 1 is for smartphones and App 2 is for vertical devices. For apps published on different mobile smart devices, they should usually be certified separately. So in this case, there will be 2 separate applications for certifications. After the app operator applies for security certification, the CCRC commissions a testing organization to conduct a technical validation of the app. The difference between this validation and the security test before applying for certification is that the security test before applying for certification mainly checks the IT security of the app, while the technical validation focuses on whether the app complies with the personal data protection regulations. And the requirements for the technical validation come from the standard GPT 35273. The standard GPT 35273 contains more than 100 requirements for the security of personal information. One example of them is if the personal information controller stops the operation of its product or service, such as the app, it must cease further collection of personal data in a timely manner, and also inform the data subject of the stop of operation by individual delivery or announcement. And also, the app operator should delete or anonymize the personal data he has. The main purpose of technical validation is to protect the rights and interests of the users. So app operators interested in certification can first conduct their own self-assessment. And according to our experience, app security certification by CCRC also emphasizes the need for a management system. That means If the app operator already has been certified according to ISO 27001, the app security certification by CCRC might be easier. After the technical validation is completed, CCRC reviews the results of the technical validation, and if there are no problems, a certificate will be issued. The app security certificate of CCRC is valid for 3 years. I'd also like to point out that according to the regulations, the app security certification by CCRC can be completed in about 19 working days in total. But in practice, the project actually takes a long time, and it can be even from 5 months to more than a year. From discussions with other professionals as well as colleagues, it appears that the current requirements for the app security certification by CCRC are still relatively strict and high, and only about 30 apps have successfully obtained this certification so far. The core idea of app compliance is to protect users' rights. There are two solutions. First, the app can be evaluated from a professional point of view, for example, through appropriate certification. And second, the app can be experienced from the user's point of view. For example, the privacy policy should be easy to understand. Although users do not pay much attention to the privacy policy, regulators are now very concerned about this part in China. For example, the China National App Administration Center reports non-compliant apps on its website regularly. And by 18th March 2022, more than 2,000 cases have been reported, and most of which are non-compliant with data protection. So next, I will use the privacy policy as an example to introduce the compliance issues. The information collected and used by the app must be open, transparent, and comprehensive when the app processes personal data. One of the most common problems is that the privacy policy is difficult to access. There is no clear answer to the question of how to define a privacy policy as difficult to access, but I have a small tip. If more than 4 clicks are required to access the privacy policy after going to the main interface of the app, then the privacy policy could be considered difficult to access. Two practice examples are accessing WeChat's privacy policy requires 2 clicks after entering the main interface, while Taobao requires 4 clicks. For this reason, while Taobao doesn't violate the regulation in terms of accessing its privacy policy, it could be improved to avoid risks. The examples I have just given are mainly related to the form of the privacy policy, but it is also worth taking a look at the content of the privacy policy. Therefore, I'd also like to give you some tips, such as in the privacy policy, you have to make sure that clear definition of the rules for processing sensitive personal data, and clear indication of the modalities for rectification, deletion, and withdrawal of consent of personal data. You also have to make sure precise indication of the channels for filing complaints. These are quite similar to the requirements of GDPR in Europe. At the end, I'd like to emphasize again that compliance is an issue for apps throughout its whole life cycle, and that problems at some point will lead to the app becoming unusable and the app operator facing fines. So that's all we have today for the webinar, and thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.